et à tous.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Please take seats for those who wish to attend the meeting. My name is Emmanuel Dutheil. I'm chief editor of L'Usine Nouvelle, and we'll discuss a very fascinating energy agriculture at the heart of transition. Of course, usually, well, we oppose the two professions, and you will see that as we will move on in the discussion, we'll see that there are more points of agreement than disagreement. But first, as the tradition stands, I will let Eric Labaye, our coordinator, who is president of the School of Polytechnics, who entered the top 40 of the best schools in the world. You know, you can give him a round of applause. Thank you. 38. I could have said the top 38. It sounds even better. But anyway, Eric, I'll let you do the introduction and set the framework for this discussion. Hello. Yes, I'll start first by reminding you that you know, a bottom trend that we could forget that lead to the major question on energy in agriculture is demographics. Just a couple of figures. We had 2.2 billion consumers in 1990. Now we got about 4 billion, 5.5 in 2030, and 6 to 7 in 2050. So you can see that in 40, 50 years, there is tension on resources because those consumers will consume energy and agriculture. Yeah, multiplied by 5 or 6. And so what results from this demographic trend? First, how can we do decarbonation? We all know with the ambition of do net zero in 2050. Let me remind you that today 50% of energy consumption is energy. So we discuss how to decarbonate energy. But when we see the global growth between now and 2050, we have to remove 75% of carbon content of the energy industry. So it's a massive challenge. Second element for agriculture, it's about 20-25% of greenhouse gases. So more on methane, azote peroxide, but again, you know, major for the decarbonation of agriculture. Second challenge for demographic growth, simply can we support development to feed the planet? Or we know today that there are many topics around the rarefication of, well, scarcity of water. Do we have enough material? We work with a finite Earth with exponential growth for the material request. Second challenge that we'll discuss, can we support this demographic growth around agriculture? So, 4 topics which I think should be addressed in terms of solutions. So do we modify the modes of production? We know production for renewable energy, what's the rate, the scale at which we move forward with renewable energy. Second topic on the agricultural side, can we do agriculture without fertilizer? Because there is high growth, increase of agricultural production with fertilizers, but can we do this for 5-6 billion consumers without fertilizers? Then innovation. Do we have new sources of energy, new sources of production, new plants, new seeds, that crops that could help us in this food and decarbonated systems? Then are we able to lower the energy consumption, the food consumption? Of course, there is a problem of energy efficiency. We got polytechnics who have a laboratory on the energy efficacy. So, and we can see it from the agricultural consumption. So, can we lower the individual consumption? Do we deal with obesity, with the problem of you know, mix animal vegetal, because a large part of greenhouse gas come from the cattle farming or animal breeding? And what about waste? Because most studies that show that in the agro-food production chain, there's 1/3 of wastage on unused products. So could we reduce this, reuse it, or not produce it, which would avoid putting tension on the resources? Fourth topic to be discussed, circular economy. You know, we want to reduce production. Do we improve production, reduce consumption? So what about the circular economy, which goes for massive reuse of material? We see it in production material of goods, but in agricultural domain, do we have a reuse of materials? Should we also rethink the mode of design? From the beginning of consumption, should we have an eco-consumption that will make it possible to do recycling and therefore to reuse materials for concerned material for increasing usage. And last point I mentioned, so why did we put agriculture and energy in the same round table, is that there is a major link between the two. 20% of renewable energy in France comes from the agriculture, biomass, sun, wind. So a major part, 3% of global production comes from agriculture. But second, there is also competition almost between energy and agriculture for the surface area available. Do we use, farming land, arable land to produce energy? So there is a whole issue that will be discussed in roundtable. Can we have sun power field and agricultural field? So about sharing the surface. So it protects from the sun, it preserves water, but it also produces energy. So this is the four domains: mix of production, demand, circular economy, and a balance between agriculture and energy, in order to solve two major problems: decarbonation of industries and support the global demography. So thank you, Eric, for this introduction. Thank you very much for this introduction, which sets the discussion. So for the fourth point is probably going to be discussed most, because by preparing my intervention, I realized that there are more links between agriculture and energy. When I had to prepare the roundtable, I thought, it's weird, we got everything on the table, but I think we'll do it. So let me introduce the speakers in alphabetical order. So there will be no ego: Xavier BARBARO, President and Director General of NEOEN; Cécile, Director General of the Groupe; Arnaud, President of FNSEA, the French Farmers Union; Olivier SCALABRE, Head of and Thierry, Director General in charge of onshore at Iberdrola, France. We'll start with you, Arnaud. Let me remind you, Thierry, you're the boss of the FNSEA, the National Agricultural Union. I'll look at the number of fans, the number of boys. I see the number of people who actually are burning hot. So this is the weather in July and October. Though there is a necessary adaptation to climate change. What I like is that when we prepared the presentation with your teams, I think you're clearly on the, well, it's a fact. So it's a fact. Let's turn it into an opportunity rather than a constraint. Yeah, indeed. At the FNSEA, we consider that this climate change for farmers is a fact, it's a reality. Harvest advanced by about, by several months over in the last 15 years. The FNSEA published a report, Climate Change, an Opportunity for Agriculture. Well, it's an opportunity because eventually, in view of all the challenges you mentioned, two stakes. Well, feed the population, to feed a population that is growing, and this is a demographic issue, and the other one, how can you deal with decarbonation? But agriculture is at the crossroad of the two challenges, because it has the ability to do decarbonation, forest and ocean, but it has also the duty to feed populations. So when you are at the crossroad of challenges as they appear today, in the farming world, agricultural, you've got responsibility and challenges. Now, before talking about challenges as climate change, well, there are a few challenges. The first one is the economy, that of sovereignty and competitiveness and overall. But I'd like to remind you anyway that agriculture in Europe is about 1% of capitals. It doesn't make investors dream. These are hourly work volume, about 50, 60 hours. And it is the socio-professional category which works most. And the most, and revenues, well, fairly limited. So you can see the first challenge, it is that of competitiveness of the business. European farms have different sizes, but they face a problem of competitiveness and income for those who work the land. And also there's a problem of renewal of generation. Some jobs will have to attract new talents with the equation I described, and they have a role to answer the societal equation. So what do we do in those days? And we think we are still we're part of the solution. Cécile, BÉLIOT, I saw you move your head in agreement. So do we group, you do the group, you do the vache qui rit, which is a sort of a spread cheese. So agriculture, energy, based on what Arnaud just said, how do you see the transition of your business model? Approve, because the discussion was well set. If I give you just the figures that have been given by this EOCD, and I will not talk about 2050, I will talk about 10 years' time. 10 years is not that much. 2022, 32. Well, the request for foodstuff will increase by 15% between now and 2032. Growth will come, where would growth come from? Asia, India, the most populated country, China, India, where middle classes do gain access to better food, and sub-Saharan Africa. And then let's say something. Well, we'll say today the model, what does it create? It creates 800 million people who are poorly fed, and 800 million children in malnutrition. So, I mean, that's malnutrition is not a business. Food is not a business. It's a human right. We have, every human being, you know, you want to feed your children 3 times a day. Differently, it's like housing, like health. So, when we follow this observation, in a group like BEL, well, in fact, it's a family business, 150-year-old. So my only obsession is how will I develop a company that will be operating in the next 100 years. So when you think like that, we cannot ignore what is behind food and nutrition, you know, and then it means the health of people, climate, of course, major loss of biodiversity. It is also, of course, the topic of well-being of those who feed us, because I always say, I feed 1,000 people. If I don't have milk, or if I don't have apples, I won't make any product. So the problem of the model as it exists today is that it causes pauperization of upstream, those who feed us, actually. So if we do not pull out, still today, the laws did not change anything. Of course they have. But again, I will show you what we do and how we do it. If you look at the model as a whole, we'll do a model that will not make it possible to feed the 10 billion people, because there is a form of paradox in the time scale. We have to act so we'll have to act now, because everything we'll do will take time. Agriculture is long, it's time. Climate and climate challenges, water, loss of biodiversity, and the link between the health and food is today. Let me give you one figure, which is an illustration of the problem of the model we have. Two. First figure, I am back from Indonesia. I was there 2 weeks ago. Indonesia is a country where basically the population has increased and has become richer, so they get better food. They feed themselves more. We got data about nutritional deficiencies in Indonesian population, and we got the same data 10 years ago. So we'll say, okay, since we contributed to the enrichment of this population, how did we provide progress of this population for this population? Do you know how much we progressed? By how much we progressed? I don't know. Well, I don't know. 0. There has been no. All deficiencies, food deficiencies that existed in Indonesia 10 years ago still exist. In the mineral, calcium, etc., etc. Obesity has progressed. So we feel people, we feel more calories, you know, they're empty calories. this is what happens. Second figure I want to share with you. The emerging countries that make progress, if they were to adopt the same food diet as the rich countries, us, all those here in the room, if they adopt the same food diet, you know, there's more protein than today because malnutrition is in their countries, we will exceed by 260% the carbon trajectory of the Paris Agreement. So, the stake is upstream to transition and to adopt farming methods which are really sustainable, and there are solutions, but also we have to explain that if we, rich countries, do not change the way we feed ourselves, there is no chance, but absolutely no chance that to solve the climate rules. Okay, what you mean is that we should deduce as they will have to increase. Very good point, because no, we can't eat less, but we can eat better. We don't want to eat less, we want to eat better, and I will talk about the solution, but that's what is at stake. We would have to produce better, and we have to eat better. Okay, well, that's most important. Thierry Vergnaud, move on to you. You're one of the managers of Iberdrola Group. Tell us what you do in one word, in a couple of words. This is why I found this fascinating, that you're on the same table. You are reshuffling the model, because the best solution before you produce the best energy is the one you don't consume. Sobriety is fashionable for you too? Sobriety, well, first, I will tell you a few words about Iberdrola, because we don't have the notoriety. This is a company which has been operating for 30 years. We invested 130 billion in the last 20 years. We do investment between 2030 that will ramp up to 150 billion in the world. It's an international group. We are present on the 5 continents, and France as well, of course. Men and women who work hard in this group, so 40,000 employees. And we got 100 million clients, because we sell energies to our customers in different parts of the world. In terms of production capacity, we were one of the first to go massively to renewable energy. So we have a production potential of about 60 gigawatts in the world, and the part which is renewable energy, dams, photovoltaic, and is about 39 gigawatts. In France, we've been present for about 20 years. We've developed wind farms, photovoltaic farms, and we are happy with the position of Polytechnic in the great schools. And we injected the first electrons of the second wind farm, 500 megawatt wind farm with 62 wind turbines, which will be finalized. It's one of the largest in France, second in France.
And the 62 wind turbines will be completely connected by the end of the year. And 1 year before the Olympic Games, we have the joy of being on the winner's podium. So the models change, of course, and are shifting. The fact that we have wind farms and solar farms throughout the land means that we are in contact with the farmers. We are in contact with local communes in different rural zones. There are all kinds of restraints as to where we can place our wind farms, so we are in contact with local populations and with farmers, and all of the landowners from whom we rent the land to make these wind farms, well, most of them, they are farmers. And so quite naturally, the topic of energy is broached. We are in that discussion, and so we ask them what we can help with agriculture, etc. And finally, in terms of frugality, we have specialists who look at energy frugality, who identify our consumption rates and identify how we can reduce energy consumption, because energy that we do not consume is the best energy that exists, but that's not enough. We saw that last winter as well. So Xavier, BARBARO, let me ask you more or less the same question. I'm not sure that everybody knows familiarly what you do. You are a French player, so let's spotlight France. On this question of frugality, it's part and parcel of the DNA of your company's creation. Your company is called NEOEN. Yes, it's a French business. We've been around for 14 years now. We were a startup, then we became a SME, and now we're floated on the stock exchange. So it's interesting to listen. There are 100 times less of us than in my neighbour's company, but are we 100 times less efficient? Who knows? We do solar energy, we do wind energy. We're present in Australia and in the Scandinavian countries also, and we recognise a lot of the words that have been spoken. And I think with this farming world and with the agro-food industry, we are conscious of the challenges, the frugality, the sovereignty issues, and we too are trying to respond to the need for energy. I mean, you don't want to have to choose between eating and switching the lights on. It's a fundamental need for human beings to have access to energy, and there are existing needs which are very high, and in the future those needs will increase. We don't want to be opposite to the farming world. You're rather in a partnership, would one say. Perhaps partnership is too strong a term. No, it's quite a legitimate term. We were the first with the National Ovine, the National Sheep Section Federation to work together. We work on solar energy plus sheep farming. And so we are working on the sheep farming side of things, but 2/3 of our company's sun energy projects in France are go hand in hand with farming. So on the one hand, we work hand in hand with the farmers. We work together on a project which will enhance or increase or sustain their farming industry while they produce energy as well. So we want to coexist with the farming world, and we try to think very carefully about that, in particular in light of experience that is being gleaned abroad in Latin America, in Australia, etc. And of course the question of storage is important. So you need less agricultural land if you could store the energy. Yes, you need to first of all focus on production, solar or wind. If you can stock the energy that you create, then you don't need as many wind turbines and solar panels, etc. But now there are more and more. Europe is hanging a bit, is at the back of the class really, in terms of this, but we hope to solve this problem. It's a problem for all of us here. We want to have greener energy, we want to be more sovereign, we want it to be cheaper. And so people don't always listen to us, but we know we're going in the right direction. Let's move on now to the next, Olivier SCALABRE. I was very surprised from BCG. You said before this round table that let's not make the mistake of opposing these two sectors. On the contrary, both sectors have to work together. Is that more or less your message, Olivier SCALABRE? Yes, indeed. Indeed, we are a consultancy firm. We help major businesses to transform. They are big businesses in the energy sector, but also in the food sector. And that gives us a kind of transversal view of those two sectors. And I do believe there's a lot of complementarity between those two business sectors. So we've got that traditional image of the farmer or the fisherman who might be against wind turbines. But in fact, these two sectors can succeed together. 75% of carbon is produced by these two sectors together. Also, both sectors need each other. And so the success of one depends on the success of the other. Energy needs farmers, needs farming land. That can be very harmonious, as Xavier has pointed out. And we also need agricultural resources to produce energy, i.e. biomass. Biomass accounts for 6% of the energy mix here in France. And if we want to reach the 1.5 degree scenario, then that 4% sector is really important. We need to add 150 tetrawatts per hour of capacity in the biomass, and that corresponds more or less to 1/3 of farming land that is used. So that is a huge chunk. I think the farming world needs energy also, first and foremost, because if energy does not reduce its carbon footprint, then I think the farming world, etc., is going to just explode. And it's a source of revenue as well for farmers. So today there are only 10% of farmers who take advantage of energy production. But of course things will change with the French laws which are being introduced. Yeah, and for me this is an opportunity. I see it as an opportunity for farmers. And you have to find a right balance for the two sectors to coexist. And I think the keystone is going to be farming land, but also biomass and conflicts of usage. So we need farmland, and there's not a lot of it. Are we going to use it for energy or for food or for carbon sinks? I think today the farmer is going to be the guardian of the temple. He or she will hold the keys. Yes, let's continue. Yes, let's not put them on opposite sides because they have very shared factors. We need to work on those common denominators. There are common denominators, of course, because both sectors are in transition right now. And the transition is quite a challenge. The challenges are the same, irrespective of which industry you're talking about. I can talk about three challenges which are very, very close in both sectors. Firstly, we've got the technological challenge. So we've seen that we need to be more frugal, but we will need technology to be successful. So you're a techno solutionist? Well, let's not fall into that trap. But when we're talking about energy, if we have the keys to reduce the carbon footprint of 50–60%, then of the carbon emissions for the 50 or 60% that remains, then we'll need hydrogen, we'll need storage capacity, we will need carbon sinks, and these are technological challenges. In the farming world, we need technologies also. We need robotics, AI. We also need chemicals, etc. So it's not so much a question of discovering new technologies because loads of them already exist. We need to put them up to scale as quickly as possible. If you just talk quickly about energy, today, if we want to respect that 1.5 degrees, then these new technologies, hydrogen, carbon sinks, stockage, etc., have to be with us within the next 5 years. If you take a look at solar and wind energy, 15% to 15 years to go from the prototype to actually using it. So we really need to speed things up, speed the technologies up. The second joint challenge pertains to funding. We need such a lot of money in these two transitions. 37,000 billion are necessary for the energy transition. 8,000 billion are necessary for the farming transition. And today, we spend about half of that each year. So we need to have players in the financial sector. So you have to stick to your financial targets if we are to satisfy our ecological targets. We have to double up, in fact, we have to double our speed. In terms of energy, new technologies need welders, for example. EDF or Arnaud are going to train 5,000 welders per year. And that's not enough. In the farming world, we need to train up the entire industry, and the farmers need regenerative farming. So we heard this question of balance, so that we can have electricity and food in the future, and that both sectors will move forward hand in hand together. So from the FNSEA, Arnaud, Rousseau, what do you have to say about that? Well, neither party can advance on their own. It's very important to work with others. So the first thing that has been said, which I'd like to come back on, because in farming, this is quite a paradox. The first thing is that we need to produce. And I'm saying this because sometimes the FNSEA talk about, they say we're productivists, but it's not that. But it is important to continue to produce. And quite uniquely here in Europe, because on many fronts, Europe has lost market share and Europe has lost its dynamic. The second point is that we need progress. And this word is challenged today. Progress is not only technology, unbridled technology. We need to continue to be able to move forward. Let's take a concrete example. We've got some talks in Brussels about new techniques for selecting genes. So we're going to have to give a framework to that, which is quite necessary, so that we can move forward. And in the future, we're going to have plants, varieties that use less water, that need fewer pesticides, that are better adapted to the climate. So we need progress. We also need to territorialize our solutions, because the constraints aren't the same here in the south of France or up in the north of France, for example. Here we've got very little land available in the south. In other areas there's more land, such as in other parts of Europe there's less urbanization, so the solutions are not going to be the same depending on where we're talking about. And solutions are changing all the time. We didn't imagine that we would be able to grow rapeseed and sunflowers in the north of France, but they are creeping up to the north of France. Yeah, for rape, yes, we have been producing that. Sunflowers are creeping up to the north of Europe as well, because farmers are adapting and because the way that they're rotating their crops is evolving also. But what I'm saying is there's going to be territorialization. We also need to talk in a calm way about the means of production and water, because whenever you talk about farming, whether you're talking from biomass or whatever, you're going to need water. And in the context that we're living in today, we're going to have to use water better, particularly when it's abundant. In winter, we're going to have to be very careful from one region to the next where the situations are different. Overall, we have more rain, which is falling in a different pattern nowadays. So you're asking for France to do things that it doesn't know how to do, i.e. use wastewater. Can you use drinking? You're not going to use drinking water to water a field. Yes, storage over the winter, for example. Using driplet watering systems. In farming, 30% of water is used, 30% less water is used today than in the past, and the figures in the biomass are also impressive. So perhaps in the future, in the planet, there'll be all kinds of solutions that can be used for water, and we'll need to adopt those solutions. Just another couple of words. We will need public policy to be continuous, to last over time. That means that we're going to need decisions, because when you're in this kind of long-term model with a lot of transition, you can't just change direction right and left depending on which political party is in power. You need consensus, which means that we can look further into the distance and head towards that more distant point. We need public policy to be stable, because we're going to need massive investments, particularly in farming, because if we want to rise to the challenge of production, feeding, biomass, evolution of the different systems, in a model which is going to be different from one part of the planet to another, well, we're going to need massive investment, and we are going to need to restore trust and confidence in that fair distribution of values, because in between the farmers and those who are not farmers, if we want to be better performing in the future, we have to be able to share value fairly. The farmers have got used to producing a lot. They know what the problems are with the hypermarkets and the retail chains. And before knowing which technique they're going to use, etc., they have to understand what value is going to be generated and how that value is going to be shared. So yes, that's you've just heard that you're going to have to pay a price, but let's give you a couple of moments to think about that. Cécile, in the meantime, let me come to you. You are an industrialist, as we've understood earlier on. You are a link in this value chain. You are a vital link in that chain. Arnaud ROUSSEAU thinks that you have to pay a little bit before, those in the middle have to pay also, and then the retail chains are going to have to pay also. But in concrete terms, how can we change the situation? You made an observation earlier on, but that wasn't a solution. Yes, I think it's important for us to note that everyone has observed what's happening, but what is interesting to us is taking action right now. Let me give you an illustration of 3 different ways of acting. It's not that difficult after all. The first thing that we do is to work in partnership with the farmers so that the farming becomes regenerative. Regenerative farming, well, you can talk about, do we need to invent a machine to capture carbon? I think it already exists, and it's called the ground. The basic, yes, but we're saying that we need carbon sinks alongside that. And agricultural land isn't enough. But it is interesting just to think about that, because everything is in nature. The ground, when it is healthy, it captures carbon. It doesn't need fertilizer to produce. It is better at capturing water. It fosters biodiversity. The methods, we know them. These are agroecology. Why do we not make that transition a bit more swiftly? Because when you've got farming upstream that doesn't know what it's going to be earning at the end of the month, you can talk about the end of the planet, but the farmer's not going to shift. At Bell, at our company, the things which we have changed is the upstream part of the dairy sector. It was because in 2017 we decided in France what we were going to do. We defined the price of milk, which does not depend on the market price. We are not defining the price of milk in terms of the ups and downs, but on terms of the production of the farmers. And we've got bonuses for ecological transitioning. And that costed us 10 million per year in France. So that's 50 million over 5 years. And when we do that, the magic of the system is that the farmers, who are entrepreneurs, they're businessmen. So what does that mean? So 1 year, 100% of our farms, we've got 800 farms in France, 800 of them have got milk produced out in the meadow. The meadow, the farms go, the cows go out into the field. They're outside in the fresh air, in the meadow. And when they're outside, they emit less methane, because a cow should not naturally be eating soya all day and be kept indoors. That's not natural. So we do a turning system for the meadows. So the cow and the breeding activity has a role. You need a cow breeding, for example, and the cows will produce natural fertilizer. Another example is protein. Our milk is non-NGOs. We feed our cows on soya, which comes from Brazil, and prevents deforestation.
Deforestation is not caused by the people in Brazil, it is caused by us because of the way we feed ourselves and the type of agriculture we've launched. So this agricultural model. So who pays the additional 50 million? Today, well, the advantage is that we are a family business and we think long term. So 50 millions, we deal with that. The thing I'm absolutely convinced of is that if we keep going in narrative that is to oppose poor of the cities against the poor of the countryside, we won't find any solution. And we got a true topic, which is sustainable agriculture is more expensive. So therefore, here collectively, we have to be involved. But there is one topic which is real, and I don't want to ignore that, which is the food precarity in France. You know, malnutrition, or before the inflation grade, 8 million people. It was food insecurity, possibly. Well, but we could talk about like food social security, or how can we, the state, can we help those families which are in such situation? But all the others who spend 14% of their money in food, they can do the additional investment. And I even think that if everybody if every inhabitant were aware of what nutrition means, with the health of the ground, the health of nature, we put the money. Except there is no awareness. People are not aware. We're kind of illiterate in this domain. Second leverage, as I said, is how we help. In order to, can we help balance your diet, your nutrition? You want to lower your carbon impact tomorrow morning, but tomorrow morning, change the way you feed yourself. You get half of the plate are fruits and veggies. 15% of the plate is 15% vegetable protein. So what is my role? Is to give you the appetite to change your nutrition. It must be products are expensive. Yeah, except that once more, as you were saying, what is at stake is the scaling. Therefore, the solution is to change the behavior of consumers, because it is the consumer that will make it possible to scale up. And solutions do exist. We work with startups which work on the wealth available in terms of vegetable proteins, but they are not scaled up today. So of course, we are going well beyond the speaking time. So let's have a last tour. So Xavier, I'll move on to you, and then Thierry Vergnaud. This idea of balance, which was fascinating. So this, you are energetic, but you're also dealing with sun power. Well, this is something we've developed here outside of France. We do now. It is a great way to reconcile several things that have been said. We heard early on that there is a need for high capital protection. We do have capital, but what we don't have is project access to the capital market, to the loaners. Lenders is fluid. Many loaners are ready to get involved, but the reality is that we don't have raw material to give them. We don't have projects for sun power plant or wind farms. So what we want to do at Direct is to have more projects, and we want to show our capability to develop new products, especially with an agricultural dimension. So we're sharing value. Yes, of course, we're ready to share value, and we want to provide the agricultural farm more financial resources. Finance is not a dirty word. Yeah, no. We're here for 30 years. Of course, we'll pay rents, we share revenues, but we're probably the best channel between the financial world, that are investors, loaners, and the agricultural world, because we have the ambition to produce more. Producing is not a rude word, and we want to show our ability to combine the two worlds. Today, in Germany, there is a successful case, the success story, where the world of energy and agriculture have I'm not sure France wants to go to a German model, So we do, no, I'll stay in my domain. I don't want to talk about methanization of number of cows per farm, but German farmers took advantage of the wind farm and the sun power from sun power and wind farms. Through my business, I want to give them additional fees, stable revenues over 20, 30 years, so that farmers can make their decision for investment to ensure the durability and profitability of their farm. I'd love to be this conveyor belt or this transmission belt between energy and farming, between agriculture and energy. So we want to produce more. We want to until 5 years ago, France was the electrical water tower, but now we're asking for electricity because we don't produce. So, and today, not only renewable is a good solution when it comes to production and to some of decarbonation, but it is the cheapest source of energy. Wind farms and sun power farms will enable us to share with the agricultural world the value and we added the savings. So for me, Iberdrola, do you work on the development of agriculture or a different model? You got well, we have about all types of development, but on this notion of sharing of value, we are very active in France Agrovoltaïs to push this domain. This professional structure is controlled by the FNSEA, so we don't have any problem discussing with the agricultural world so that there is a sharing, but there is a sharing and a balance at one stage. We don't want this notion of energy, we don't want to prevail over agriculture, so we need to develop a whole set of technologies and know-how based on the type of farms of culture, so that it will be something that that thing should be balanced. Now, let me reposition what is at stake when we come to agrovoltaism. In 2025, the speed at which we can get authorization and that red tape can be a problem. If we say there will be 2 gigawatts of installed in 2025, it means that 2 gigawatts are already being studied, engineered, whatever. So it is something fairly precise. In 2026, just behind that, it won't be that more important. It will be about 3 gigawatts. So we are at the bottom of the curve. Now, when it becomes interesting, and this is what is at stake in this discussion with the farming world and with the energy experts, in 2030, we will have 60% of this total sun power that will be agrovoltaism, because don't look for quarries and so on and so forth. There is, so what is at stake? One of the problems to find land that would facilitate energy production, well, it is with the agricultural farm, and then there will be 60 to 80 gigawatt out of the 120 planned in 2050. So today, you talked early on about the milk production and so on and so forth. We've developed technologies. We responded to the call for tenders from ADM for small units, 3 megawatts. We won with an improvement of wheat milk production in the east. So there are several topics that are taking place, but they should move on to another step. And the other step is not achieved. And finally, and I'll close on that, if we remain Franco-French, we won't succeed. Today, we clearly have the opportunity to have a vision of a certain number of countries. Today, Spain faces is launching a tendering process for agro-photovoltaic farms, but technologies, well, there are a few technologies which are emerging, but they won't be sufficient. So there is a capex, an economic challenge. I mean, you should have enough project, as you said, enough project authorized, enough technologies to be developed so that, economically speaking, they could be realistic. One last roundtable will succeed if you all have 1 minute 30. Arnaud Rousseau, you said early on, we're talking about solutions, so when we see the discussions around the mega basins and what happened in Nantes, elsewhere, so discussion on animal breeding, some countries said that they will destroy part of the head counts in animals. So how can you convince when you get a feeling that the discussion is blocked? Well, we can convince people because the principle of reality in agriculture, it's always there. Some of our compatriots didn't like the nuclear power plants, but you know, when they realized that when last winter there could have been power shortages, you know, the public opinion evolved. I'm convinced that in agriculture, people will become aware of the usefulness of producing food and continue energy production. Let me remind you just that French agriculture is acknowledged by several international organisms as one of the most sustainable. So, of course, each time we ask ourselves the question, is it good? We have to see what is the alternative. What could be the alternative? What else? What could be the, what could we do? Something better in a durable way in a modern world. Well, we have to find balance in everything, and we will need to share, because if agriculture is a solution, it's not the only one. We talk about water, of course. There is drinking water, there is the sharing. When we talk about the techniques, we know what we need to do to have a lesser impact tomorrow, to restore biodiversity where agriculture has an impact, and tomorrow it can come. So we don't want to ignore problems. We want to align people who want to work to find solutions. And I leave aside everything that you know, is degrowth, you know, degrowth or anti-capitalism. So I want concrete solutions for farmers and make sure that we move on. We'll have to find balances, because let me say one word about proteins. Let's not oppose animal protein and vegetable proteins. We are convinced that both should play a role, and if we want to preserve the prairies, which are carbon sinks, we'll have to put cows on them. In some territories in France and in Europe and in the world, there are locations where we won't put just animals because the environment doesn't make it possible to do farming or in different ways. So let's say that there is a very French model. No. When we look at what is at stake, we still need one to talk about the scope, and France is not enough. We need Europe. Second, we need to talk about coherence, and then we talk about investment. We look ahead, and agriculture wants to meet the two challenges. We don't want to drop food production, but we have to ensure the challenges of production of biomass. And alors, the thing BÉLIOT, how could we have healthy, sustainable food in 2030? Well, this is exactly what I explained. The energy we deployed, you know, the mass leverage is individual. You make choices, you all enter shops, you all decide what you put in your plate, the valorization you put in or not. There is a topic you mentioned, that food wastage. So 30% of the food is wasted. Why in France? More than 20% of what you put in your fridge is wasted because you don't pay any attention to it. This is what it is. So I think you are it is your choice to work differently, to act differently. You know, don't blame. You know, we're together on the same round table. We have a relationship with distributors who grow and who evolve, and we are able to have partnership with them because for the whole chain, the distributor doesn't just distribute, he selects. Each time he puts a product in a store, he selects the product, he chooses the product. He has a major impact on the way people feed themselves, but they are dealing with this. They see it as this. Thierry Vergnaud, securization of the model, renewable, will have to prove that they're a true alternative. Yes, we are developing renewable energy projects strongly. There are two challenges. First, we don't want to oppose people or domains, farmers or energy producers, elected officials, state services. We want to make them work together. We want to be able to produce the gigawatts announced and that we need. And the major challenge is to do our best to have territorial appropriation. That's the real challenge we face. Xavier BARBARO. So I was talking about sharing, but to set things to it, we paid 10% of our turnover for the rents, or the owners who get their products. The more we grow, the more money we pay. You know, so I think it's great, but to look at the topic in another angle for our customers, regardless of our customers, clients, we want to provide electricity, green and fresh electricity, and 20% cheaper than all the other conventional alternatives. The larger we'll grow, the more we'll share with the farm world, the agricultural world, and will be a factor of competitiveness for our customers, and especially for the agro-food industry. Olivier SCALABRE.
Il faut créer des écosystèmes. Si on doit faire un pré-résumé avant Eric Lavaille, et après on va se faire hurler dessus, donc vraiment vous tenez la minute.
En fait, vous vous souvenez,
do you remember at the time of COVID, Schneider Electric and Air Liquide who got together and they fabricated breathing devices? Well, that's the same thing. We got producers, we got industrialists, startups, and consumers. Well, all this, you know, we need coalition, and all those players work together. It's not even within the same chain of value, because agriculture and energy will function together. I think the private sector will have to function as an ecosystem.
Vous pouvez l'applaudir d'avoir donné la minute. Eric Lavaille, pour l'école polytechnique et notre modérateur, on a de la chance aujourd'hui. Pour votre conclusion, je vous ai vu prendre plein de notes pendant la table ronde. Vous l'avez inventé là en plus, la conclusion.
absolument.
So, conclusion, 3 points. First, we had the demonstration of complementarity between industries. That was not obvious for everybody, but production of energy for agriculture, the question of assignment of or utilization of farmland. Well, we'll have continue. Second element, there are solutions. We talked earlier on about production, new modes of production and sobriety. We got many examples. There are working axes on both. It does exist, technology exists, innovation is there, know-how is there, and therefore the third point is that speed and scale. How do we go now from this solution, from the scale, but not just in France, but everywhere? You know, most consumers today are in Europe, so how do we go to the scale? If we, in 2050, we want to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, we have to change drastically. And the last point is that we have enough time to talk about it, but what is the economic equation? What are the incentives? How can we invite citizens to evolve? And what is the reflection? You know, we cannot leave citizens without values in their production. So there is all reflection to be had, you know, and pedagogy, how to communicate with the largest number on the facts we share today, but on how do we ensure that there will be more projects, because there is the capital, but these projects are there. So how do we get more citizens who will work as well, so that to make things move forward? So this is a change management, incentives, whatever. So this could be the main topic for me, because in terms of technology, we have solutions. Now let's increase the speed and the scale. Thank you. Congratulations.
Et intervenant pour cette table ronde.
Bye bye.
Rencontres économiques d'Aix.